There we go. Okay, good morning and hello. Again, I love it if you would just let me know if you've got audio. We are going to give video. Hi, those of you who are with me on the webinar, thanks for being there. And Michelle says we've got audio. Yay, good job, thanks. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. So good to have you with me today. Today we are going to talk about something a little bit different. We're going to talk about how to give more value in an iris assessment. So I would love to know how many of you that are with me right now are actually practicing iridologists. If you are, give me a 1 in the comments. If you're not, that's great. You're still in a good place because this is a foundational piece that is so important. Now, as we look at this, and if you're with me on Facebook, my apologies, it wasn't streaming properly. I'm not able to follow your comments, but I promise I will come back to your comments when we're done and we'll respond to you then. How to give more value in an iris assessment, what an iridologist can and can't do and can and can't say. So those are really intertwined. Now I want to know from you, I'd love some feedback. When you consider, when you're using a business, for example, you're going and you are going to lay down some money for a service or for a product, what do you consider more value to be? If you're going to a restaurant, is more value giving you more food, a bigger portion? Is more value giving you timely service, making sure your food is presented as ordered, piping hot if it's a hot food, nice and cold if it's a cold food? Do you consider it a good service if the wait staff is attentive, they clear dirty dishes away quickly, they know the menu, they are willing, they fill your water or whatever you're drinking up and without being asked? They're kind of there to help, but they're also not obtrusive. Is that what you consider good service? I would love to know when you consider more value / good service. What does that look like? And I'd love to see some comments in the chat box here. When you're getting more value from someone, or more value, does it always mean more content? Or does it sometimes mean that they are giving you the right content for your needs? I would love to see some comments here. Hi, Dr. Kujuri. It's nice to see you on Instagram. Thanks for being there with us. All right, so I'm going to give you my perspective on this. My perspective on this is that more value is not necessarily more information. As a matter of fact, I think when we're working with clients that sometimes, many times, more information than what the client can handle right now is actually a detriment. Hi, Marina, good to see you on Instagram. Thanks for being there. And so when we're talking about more value, we want to look at what that really looks like. All right, so this iris, for example, shows an overall pattern of resiliency. As we look at this iris and we see that these fibers in the iris are fairly fine, they're very straight, they're very densely packed. That suggests that this person has a good resiliency. And so when we are, if we are not giving good value, if we are spewing a lot of information out at this person, we might actually be tempted to say the wrong things. For example, as iridologists, we don't have the option of diagnosing or prescribing. So to look at an iris like this and to say that, and for those of you on Instagram, I'm going to move my camera closer so we can look at various factors here. To say that this person has an excess of mucus, that they need to do some bowel cleansing, to tell them that they're carrying toxicity that might be sulfur-based, that's wrong. That's wrong. It's scientifically incorrect first, but it's also giving the client information that's not useful. That's not giving good value, and it's also diagnosing. Are you hearing what I'm saying here? And so what we want to do here with something like this is we need to consider what their symptoms are and how what their eye teaches us about why those symptoms might be. Does that make sense? The eyes are inherent. The eyes teach us what this person's genetic capabilities are, what their genetic potentials are, their genetic tendencies. They don't teach us what's going on right now. That's the job of the sclera. The sclera teaches us what's going on right now. But again, it doesn't give us disease names. None of what we're doing gives us a disease name. So when we see this kind of an eye, we need to remember that we are looking at predispositions. And so while this eye has a very good resiliency, that means this body will respond nicely when we give it the right support nutritionally, with supplements, with herbs, emotionally, in every way, shape, and form possible. We also need to consider that this person inherently is predisposed to a stomach lining that is not as strong and resilient. And that may be really where the focus needs to be with this person, is what is that resiliency, right? So we're only talking about resiliency and potentials here. We are not talking about absolutes, because we need to couple what we see in the eyes with the client's symptoms with questions to gather more information. So for example, if this, as again, we look at this eye, we see that there is this predisposition towards the gut not being, the stomach lining rather, not being as robust as we want it to be. But this is inherent. This person hasn't done it to themselves. We're not going to see this marker go away. We see that predisposition towards some congestion in the way they circulate their nutrients, and this may be a predisposition towards a buildup of mucus in the body, but we don't know that for sure until we have that conversation with the client. We also see that this person is predisposed inherently to not being able to excrete waste products properly through the skin, and to also have some congestion in the surface blood and lymph. So we see these potentials. Are they manifesting? Well, we need to ask our client the questions. Our client would come in with a list of problems that they've got that they want our help with. So if this client came in with concerns about acid reflux, or about weakened immune response, or about skin conditions, or about circulation, because they have symptoms, then these eyes certainly are giving us a lot of information in that regard, in those regards, and we can continue to ask more questions about what's going on, about what they're actually doing about those symptoms, about when the symptoms started, about how long they last, what triggers them, all that kind of stuff, right? So we need to put that all together. But the eyes show us where the inherent potentials are, and the eyes then give us information as to how to help deal with this. Recommendations that we can make. Now, we're not diagnosing, we're not naming a disease process, and we are not prescribing. And so sometimes what we see with eyes is that the symptoms that they come in don't actually match what we see in the eyes. And that can happen because even if they've got excellent resiliency, they may have not had an excellent lifestyle. You can take a Rolls-Royce car, which has an amazing warranty. I don't own one, just letting you know. Has an amazing warranty with a fabulous service package. I mean, they are engineered to last as long as you take care of them. They'll last way longer than your little Chevy whatever, or your little Ford whatever, right? Because they're engineered that way. And so, but you can take this Rolls Royce and you can absolutely drive it into the ground. If you don't do the lube jobs and oil changes, it's not going to last the way it's supposed to, and your warranty is going to be null and void. By the same token, you can be driving that little Chevy or that little Ford that, you might be good to get 15 years out of it. But if you do the lube jobs and oil changes, if you do the maintenance as is required, it means that that car is going to last, and you might get 20 years out of it. So you can have someone who's got a less resilient constitution actually experience very good health for the very long term, simply because of the care they take of their body, right? Is this making sense? So when we look at this would be an eye that we would consider to be someone who has less inherent resilience. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Liva York. Good to see you on Instagram with us. This eye has less resiliency. Notice how there are lots of gaps in the fibers, how the fibers are not straight and well organized. There's a lot of waviness to them. So this again is a person whose eyes show us that this body is inherently less resilient. What does that mean? Well, this person probably had to learn at a very young age that the rules that they needed to live by were different than someone with strong resiliency. This person probably figured out that there were foods they couldn't eat, that they couldn't stay up late at night, that there were certain supplements that worked really well for them, that that they just needed to be a little more careful. And that gives us lots of information, whereas this person likely didn't learn those lessons, probably learned that they could get away with anything. Cast iron stomach, I can eat anything, right? And they could drink anything. They could stay out late. They could party hard. They could really abuse the body. But when they turned 40, it started to fall apart and they wondered why. Well, it's because they took that Rolls Royce and they drove it into the ground. This person took that other little car, that little Chevy or that little Ford, and went, I like my Chevy. I like my Ford. I want to take really good care of it. I want this body to last. I want to do everything I can to help it along. So when we look at this, then we also know that we need to watch what this client is doing. Because if this client comes in with symptoms that don't actually match what their eyes say, it's because they've earned those symptoms. With the iris, again, the iris is the blueprint of the body's inherent potentials. And it doesn't account, the iris does not account for the abuse that gets dished out. Okay, so when we are talking about doing an iris analysis, and we're going to do look at a couple of different cases in just a moment here, but when we are looking at doing an iris analysis, I just want to flip this around here. There we go. When we're looking at doing an iris analysis, we need to remember that the eye is teaching us about the inherent potentials. The iris itself teaches us about the inherent potentials. And we again need to correlate the symptoms the client has and the lifestyle the client has to understand why their body is doing what it's doing. So we're going to have to ask them questions about food choices, about their supplements, about their lifestyle, about everything we can, even about emotional issues and those kinds of things that are not measurable, right? To understand what's going on. Hi, Naturally Wellbeing. Good to see you. Thanks for being there. And so ideally, as an iridologist, we actually need to have other modalities, right? We need to understand nutrition to make nutritional recommendations. If we live somewhere where we can recommend supplements and herbs, we need to maybe have that background so that we can actually work with our client and give them recommendations that will be useful. So when we are looking at giving more value in an iris assessment, we're not necessarily looking at giving more information. I mean, you've seen these on social media, right? Where people post their eye photos, usually not really great eye photos, and they say, tell me what's wrong. And then you'll see iridologists posting long lists of every marker they see, what it could mean, because they've learned a one-to-one correlation, and then a long list of what needs to be done. Well, that's not very helpful. That's actually not giving value. That's really vomiting information, right? And it's not helpful because the client doesn't know actually where to begin in the process. When people give these long one-to-one correlations, one marking equals one problem equals one thing you need to do, it means that the client has to sort out where are they beginning? Where's the beginning? Where's the end? Because they've got this great big list of things and they don't know where the beginning is and where the end is. All right? Does that make sense? That overwhelming clients with too much information is not giving more value. It's only giving more information. You see the difference there? So it comes down to us as iridologists and holistic practitioners to understand iridology, to understand how the markings work together, to understand what the client's symptoms are, what the client's predispositions are, what the client's lifestyle is, so that we can assess where is the starting point? What is truly the first thing the client needs to do? And give the client that piece of information first, right? That first step, what's the first thing they need to do and why is it important? A lot of clients like to know the why. So why is it important? This is so critical that we not overwhelm our clients with long lists of data and information, because that's not going to help anyone if they don't take action, or if they take the wrong action. If they start at the wrong place in the program, they're not going to get anywhere. Does that make sense? If it does, give me a thumbs up or give me a yes in the comments. Let me know if that makes sense. That we need to be responsible as practitioners and craft the program to start at the right place so we can take the client through a wellness journey. Right? So important. Okay, let's look at some things that we see, and we're going to flip this camera around. There we go. So for those of you on Instagram, I apologize for making you be seasick here. Alrighty, so this is a client, actually my husband, because he lets me take pictures of his eyes as often as I want to. This was his first picture done at the age of, the first picture that I still have at the age of 42. This was a print film. So this was actually a print that we then scanned in. This was taken 23 years later with my 24 megapixel digital iridology camera. Okay, so when we look at an iris photo, we cannot say the client has diabetes. We cannot say the client has heart disease. We cannot say they've got psoriasis. We don't get to diagnose or prescribe. Now, we may see indicators in the eyes that suggest a predisposition towards heart disease or a disease process of some sort, but we don't get to diagnose. Even medical doctors who practice iridology, and there are a few of them in the world, do not diagnose from the iris. They assess from the iris, then they run other tests, and that is how they come up with the diagnosis. And that's really important if you're going to name a disease, that you are a licensed professional who is allowed to do that, and that you do it using proper protocols. But what we can do as iridologists is we can ask questions, and we don't really care what a disease is called, because if we give a disease a wrong name and then we recommend protocols based on that incorrect name, then we haven't given the client anything useful at all, right? So what we need to ask constantly as we're working with our clients is there a personal or family history of whatever we're suspecting? So if the client comes in with symptoms that we recognize as potentially being type 2 diabetes, and if we were to look in a client's eyes and see an indication potentially of type 2 diabetes, we would then want to ask, is there a personal or family history of blood sugar disorders? Notice we didn't say type 2 diabetes, because that would be a diagnosis. Even if the client says they actually do have a blood sugar disorder, we cannot give it a name. If they come in and say, I've been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, we can't call it that. Okay, that's really important. We can teach them what we see about markings in the eyes, and we can share those markings with them, and we can teach them what the usual, what common understandings of those markings are. And, if we see something that suggests an issue with blood sugar metabolism, we can show them those markings and say there's a high correlation. And we can talk with them about their diet, and we can advise them to clean up their diet, ask them if they've had dietary counseling, and make sure that we give the right recommendations without prescribing. So this is really an important thing, because we need to make sure that we are staying within our scope of practice. So important. Now, as we look at this, one of the things that I actually want you to look at as well, and it'll be harder for you to see on Instagram than it is for my people who are on the webinar to see. When we look at this eye, this is the same eye taken 23 years apart with different camera equipment. Can you see some differences here? So here I want you to look at the color of the sclera. Look at the color of the extra pigments. Look at the size of the pupil. And then come over to the newer picture. Look at the pigments. Look at the color of the sclera. And look at the size of the pupil. Now, one of the things that I want you to really pay attention here to, there's actually two things that I want you to pay attention to as we do this. The first one is that we used different cameras. Okay, different cameras with different light sources. This image had an incandescent flash. This has an LED flash. Incandescent is more yellow. LED is more blue-white. That is going to alter the colors we see. All right, the color of the light alters the colors we see. The other thing we need to be aware of is that every camera has settings for how you can alter the color. And you may think your cameras are set up exactly the same, but with the technical differences between cameras, even something that is set up for the same white balance is going to produce, if you've got two cameras, each set up for this, and it looks like they're set up for the same white balance, they are going to produce different colors on the images. Really important to know that. When we look at the pupil size, you know this if you've done anatomy and physiology. Pupil size is dictated in part by nervous system and largely by the amount of light. The LED light is much brighter than the incandescent light. That is what accounts for the smaller pupil. When the pupil is smaller, the fibers get pulled. They get stretched out. And that accounts for why these fibers are straight and these fibers are a little bit wavier. Okay, so none of what we're seeing here is about healing. This is about technical differences in the camera. Does that make sense? And it is so important to recognize that. You're going to see before and after pictures online where it's clearly different cameras. The skin tones are different. The sclera colors are different. And they're going to say, look at the before and after. And it's no, the camera is different. And then we see here, we see that over these ensuing years, we have this has developed. Do you see we've got this pigment down here? We don't have it here, but we do have it here. This has accumulated. This isn't the deposit of toxins. This is a genetically programmed accumulation. Genetically programmed accumulation. What does it tell us? It tells us that at a specific time in this man's life, his liver has been programmed inherently to have some struggles, to begin to have some struggles, which we are seeing a little bit. He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he's got a clean diet, but we're seeing some suggestions that his liver might not be as happy as we want it to be. When we see this, we are going to ask questions about what's going on. What are his symptoms? And his symptoms are that his skin is amazingly itchy, right? And we know that that can be liver, it can be thyroid. So then we need to dig deeper and see, are there any other indications of something that might be out of balance here? Is this making sense? This does not mean he needs a detox. Putting him through a 30-day cleansing fast is not going to get rid of this from his eyes. Putting him onto an all-fruit diet is not going to get rid of this, but knowing his metabolism, it might kill him, especially with where we live. And so, you know, we just want to be aware that we do not diagnose and prescribe. And we want to avoid giving long lists of one marking equals one symptom equals one remedy. It doesn't work like that. So let's do a little case study here. This is a client of mine. She's female and she is mid-40s. When we took these pictures, so this is her right iris, this is her left iris. When we took these pictures, she's 5 feet 10 inches tall and she weighed 200 pounds and she was gaining weight. She was not happy about that. She was also experiencing a lot of difficulty with her joints starting to ache and depression, which was worse in the winter. Now, we live north of the 49th parallel, which means we have very, very short sunlight hours in the wintertime, and prevalent condition called seasonal affective disorder, which is winter depression because of not enough sunlight. She also has very painful menstrual periods. So her inherent predisposition, let's look at this. She has what we consider to be a lymphatic iris because she's got blue in her eyes and we can see fiber, blue and fiber. She has a central heterochromia that is brown, which suggests to us that her liver wants to be a little bit of a troublemaker for her. And when we look at her fiber structure itself, we see that the fibers are quite wavy, quite woven looking in places, lots of little gaps in the fibers. And this all suggests that her connective tissue, the stuff that literally holds her body together, may not be as tough and strong and resilient as we want it to be. So we are going to have to be very careful and very diligent with how she eats to make sure she is digesting her food well, and that she is getting foods that are going to give her the building blocks to repair her structural tissues. She also, with this central heterochromia, has some very dirty yellow in here, right in here. This very, very dirty yellow that we see, and it's not just in the central heterochromia, it's throughout other parts in her eye as well, suggests that her kidneys want to create some issues for her. And when we add to it that she has this particular marking, the shoe lacuna, that really suggests that she is very prone to some kidney issues. She's not prone to kidney infections. She doesn't have a history of that. But when you know your anatomy and physiology and you remember that kidneys are about balancing acid, and that an excess of acid can show up in many ways in the body, including joint problems, then we know where we're headed. We also want to remember that the acid imbalance, when they're too acidic, which is 99% of people who have any kind of an acid problem, it tells us that she's probably going to be very prone to inflammation because acid creates inflammation. Is this making sense? This is making sense. Give me a yes somewhere in the comments. And we know that weight gain always starts with inflammation, right? And so, excellent, Michelle. Thank you for letting me know that this is making sense. So, knowing what her symptoms are, the first thing was not to put her on a weight loss diet. That's the wrong thing to do. I needed to ask her about her digestion. And she said that she doesn't have any symptoms, but her eyes suggest there's an inherent challenge. When we look at that nutritive zone and at the stomach lining, it suggests that there might be some challenges with how she digests her food. So, and womb therapist says yes, and so does Naturally Wellbeing. Yes, excellent. Thank you for weighing in on that on Instagram. Appreciate that. And so I asked her about her bowel movements, her poops, and she said she was having rabbit pellets. What does that suggest? Slow bowel transit time, dehydration, probably a lack of magnesium, right? So we see a lot of things here. We know magnesium is neutralizing to acid levels and can help to reduce inflammation. So we've got a lot of things going on. I had to ask her about her diet then, right? Because acid comes from either poor digestion or poor diet, right? So I asked her about her diet, and at the time she was drinking 3 to 4 cups of coffee per day. Now, I do not care what the research shows about antioxidants in coffee, because I note that when they talk about antioxidants, they never talk about the acid levels like the tannic acid and things like that. They never talk about the damage that does to the stomach lining. They never talk about how that acidifies the body. And for most people, it's that stomach lining and the acidification that coffee leads to that is more significant than any amount of antioxidants they'll ever get from their coffee. So, and when you look at coffee and what it does to the thyroid and to the liver, as well as the stomach lining and the adrenals and the way it increases inflammation, my goodness, it's not a good food. I can't tell you how many cases of arthritis I have seen go into spontaneous remission just because the client followed my instructions to cut out coffee. Interesting. So in my first appointment with this client, and actually she's been a client for many, many years. She just, you know, as my clients do, they come in for 5 or 6 appointments and then they disappear for a few years. And then when their body shifts and they're starting to have some issues, they come back in again and we have to retweak their diet and their program. So this was on about her 4th come back to me because she's been with me for so long. And in this restart, this reboot, if you will, I suggested again getting rid of the coffee. She had done it many times before and always felt better for getting rid of it. And this time around, she was back on the coffee and it was like, okay, come on, we've had this conversation how many times? It's not doing you any good now, certainly not any more good than it ever did before, which was none. So you need to get off the coffee. And we did that. And we wanted, because that's going to support the liver and the acid levels, right? We mentioned the liver wants to run her show. Her stomach doesn't want to do its job all the way. Her acid is likely elevated. And coffee is one piece that we can put in that's going to have a significant impact on everything. Just get rid of that coffee. We also suggested a collagen supplement. I love the Nature Sunshine Hydrolyzed Collagen. It is a beautiful product. We suggested the Nature Sunshine digestive enzymes for her and started having her add some leafy greens to her diet. She'd gotten out of that habit. Leafy greens, of course, are all about alkalizing the body. Oops, I did not mean to do that. There we go. On her second appointment, which would have been about 4 weeks later, she was doing everything that I'd suggested and she was feeling noticeably better. Her joints were significantly better. She also had some seasonal affective disorder kicking in, but that in our first appointment, that was starting to improve. So now I asked her about her water intake and she was drinking 3 whole glasses a day, which for someone who should weigh probably about 170 pounds, but is weighing 200, 3 glasses is not nearly enough. I asked her about her sleep because, again, when we understand how the body works, if the liver is cranky, sleep won't be good, right? And so we needed to ask her about that. And we know that the liver is the seat of most depression, according to traditional Chinese medicine. And her sleep wasn't great. It was broken all over the place with wide awake gaps in the middle of the night. It wasn't just wake up, roll over, go back to sleep. It was wide awake gaps where she could have gone back to work if she'd wanted to. So what we then suggested was, in addition to what she was already doing, like getting rid of the coffee and adding the leafy greens, we suggested that she needed to get some protein at every meal. Oh, naturally, well, yes, anger for the liver. Absolutely, absolutely. And she was working through some garbage right about then. So thank you for reminding me of that one. We suggested getting a little bit of protein at every meal, and especially to focus on the vegetarian vegan type proteins, the plant proteins. Not that I think we should not use animal proteins, but just saying that for her, the plant proteins made more sense. I suggested that she talk to her doctor and get a SAD lamp so she could get an insurance receipt for it, but you can buy a SAD lamp without that if you want. And that she start walking for 30 minutes a day, because she was inactive at this point in time, just at a gentle pace. I just wanted some movement. And I wanted her to work at building up her water intake to 6 glasses a day, which would not be quite enough, but it would be doubling what she was doing. So it was moving in the right direction. Does that all make sense why I did all of that? And in her third appointment, the doctor had given her a prescription for the SAD lamp, and she was using it appropriately, which is for 20 to 40 minutes within the first hour of waking up. What she was finding is she would turn that on and she would do yoga while she was under her SAD lamp. What a beautiful way to start the day. And she said she absolutely loved it. She loved it. It just built her energy, made her feel so good. She was drinking more water, which was brilliant, but she wasn't getting her walks in every day. And so we knew we needed to keep reinforcing that. Naturally well-being, yeah, it is interesting. You are very welcome. I'm glad you're with us. So are you seeing how this works? I didn't diagnose, I didn't prescribe, but because we understand how the markings work together and how what information the markings give us about the body, we are able to dig deep So it wasn't just throwing a liver supplement at her. It wasn't just throwing a weight loss program at her. It was actually understanding what these markings mean and what they mean for how the organs are likely working, correlating what we understand about that with the symptoms, and then creating a program from that that is doable. I haven't talked about everything I see in her eyes. That would be called vomiting, right? I haven't given her a recommendation or a supplement for everything I see in her eyes. That would also be called vomiting. How we give more value in an iris assessment is to take the time to understand what our client wants help with, then to understand what their eyes are teaching us about those issues that they want help with, and then to understand what our client is currently doing to help themselves. We give more value by building on that foundation in manageable steps, steps that our clients can actually stick with. Does that make sense? Because when you give your client a program that they can actually stick with, they actually get success. They achieve success. And this is so exciting. Now, this is another client of mine. She is in her mid-50s, and she also has been a client of mine for over 2 decades, and she's just come back to me recently again, which is very exciting. I love it when my clients come back. I'm happy when they graduate for that length of time and they're off doing their own self-care, and when things are not working right, I love it when they come back. So this client of mine, I helped her when she was having her babies 20 odd years ago, which was very exciting. And she's got 2 beautiful sons in their late teens, early 20s now. And as we look at this, we see that she has what we call a biliary eye type, which means that we don't see any blue in her eyes, but we do see lots of browns and tans, and we do see fiber. So biliary means that her liver wants to really run the show and that the gallbladder is going to get in on this. Now, she's very young. She's only in her 50s. Okay, she's younger than I am. That makes her very young, right? And so as we look at her eyes, her concern was she is gaining weight. Her concern is that she doesn't feel her immune system is great. And she really just wanted to feel energized again. Her work is interesting in that she works with clients one-on-one. And when she gets into the groove, she forgets to take care of herself. So she'll go 10 hours doing her work without taking so much as a pee break, let alone a food break. So as we looked at her eyes, and she came in and she said, since we had worked together like over a decade ago, she had been diagnosed with a very rare genetic issue that means that her body cannot replace and repair its collagen efficiently or effectively. So her body is always falling behind on tissue repair. And it's an autoimmune kind of disorder, but it's got a genetic base, and there is no known cure, no known way of working around this. And so as we're looking at her diet or at her eyes and getting more information and asking, well, what is your diet like? Well, supper's really good because she cooks for her 2 sons who are still at home. Breakfast might happen, probably coffee and maybe a bagel. Lunch will happen if there's leftovers from the night before, but if she has to make something from scratch, it's not going to happen, so she skips lunch. And she's wondering why she's gaining weight. Well, if you understand metabolism the way I do, the less you eat, the more you'll gain. As your metabolism slows down slower and slower, thinking you are starving, that there's a famine going on, it will conserve energy and will put everything it can into fat to try to protect you for when there really is no food left, right? And that's where her body's at. So as we look at her eye, we also see that not only is she the connective tissue type, as we look at the disorganized fibers in here, but you will also notice that she is polyglandular. She's got a lot of lacunae that are attached to the collarette, and that says polyglandular, which shrieks predisposition towards hormone imbalances of every kind possible. And again, it's a predisposition to, so we had to dig deeply to sort out what could that be. How are her menstrual periods? Well, she's definitely perimenopausal, and really, getting to where, she's got 6 months since her last period, so probably, hopefully, she's come up to the end of it now. And so that's fine. But what she really wanted was overall health. Now, as we looked at her eyes, and I didn't bring up her sclera photos for you, as we looked at her eyes, she has a marking in her sclera. And she's actually got a different marking in her iris, which I'm going to teach you about in just a minute. But the marking in the sclera suggested that she is fermenting her carbohydrates. And that is often a precursor to either a systemic yeast infection or to type 2 diabetes. Now, keep that idea in mind. And I did speak very freely with her. I've known her for so many years that I know that I can say what I need to her. I looked at her eye here, and you see she's got this very heavy white ring around both of her eyes. Now, if you're an old style iridologist, you're saying that's a sodium cholesterol ring. It's, blah, 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 high blood pressure, blah, 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 which it could be. She has no high blood pressure though. Her blood pressure is just fine. In constitutional iridology, we understand that this reflects a liver enzyme imbalance that again is affecting how she metabolizes her carbohydrates, which could be a precursor to or a suggestion of things like type 2 diabetes. It could be elevated, that her cholesterol will elevate because of this, and her triglycerides. And it could be that those things may sediment in her arteries and create some issues with blood pressure and arterial blockages. So when I said to her, I am very concerned that you are not taking care of yourself. I know I taught you better than this when you were getting ready to have your babies. And so I'm going to really come down hard on you here because I'm very concerned about you. I said, this all suggests, and the weight gain and her waist measurement was over 40 inches, over 36 inches, which is another screening tool for type 2 diabetes in a female. I said, you are showing me every symptom that says you are headed straight for, if not at the edge of, developing insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. At which point she broke down in tears. I gave her a moment to bring herself back into the moment. And I said, tell me what's going on. And she said, my father is an insulin dependent diabetic. And I swore I would take better care of myself than that. What do I need to do now? And so we have begun that journey of fixing her diet, of helping her to be the most important person in her life, because if she does not take care of herself, there will be no one to take care of her boys, right? And the work she does is fabulous. There will be no one to take care of the people she takes care of. And so we really had that heart to heart that was very much, you have to put on your own oxygen mask first. And so we've talked about, what are the strategies for getting some daily activity? What are some strategies for making sure you get lunch every day? And the easy one was, she's great at making supper. So make extra and put it aside and label it for you. Tell the boys that if they want leftovers for lunch the next day, you need to know so you can make double batches of everything so they can have lunch too. Otherwise, they need to be on their own, and you need to take the leftovers for your lunch, right? We needed to talk to her about coffee. She was back into the coffee after having been off it 2 decades ago, because that's not going to help anything. If the stomach lining is not tough and strong, how is she going to digest her proteins? And if she's not digesting her proteins, how can she possibly make any connective tissue, let alone the little bit that her body is capable of repairing and regenerating? So we needed to get her off the coffee. We needed to add some digestive enzymes to her program. Needed to make sure she's drinking water. Needed to really reinforce that the work she does, she takes walk-in clients as well as bookings. And I said, you need to, in your schedule breaks. And if if a potential client comes in for a walk-in and it's on your break, you need to respect yourself enough, and you need to respect your client enough to model good behavior for them, that you say, hey, I'm just finishing up my lunch break. Can we start your walk-in session in 20 minutes? And if the client says, nope, I'm out of here, then they're not the client for you, right? You need people who respect you as clients, not people who want to walk all over you. And that is a lesson that we as holistic practitioners need to really internalize, right? So important. So, so important. So she's well on her way. She's really honest with me, which I love, and my clients pretty much are. I try to make this the safest place on the face of the planet for them to tell me, yeah, I really screwed up. You know, and then I can say, okay, tell me what you did that you screwed up with. Let's figure out strategies that are going to help you to stay on track longer next time. We're all human. We all screw up. Perfection is not required. Consistently good effort is. Right? Does that make sense? As long as it's not a life-threatening situation, perfection is not required. And so I really work with my clients to help them understand that they are in control of their wellness, and I will support them on the journey no matter what it takes. So in order to deliver the best value, we need to deliver the targeted information that our clients need, nothing more, nothing less. We need to deliver the information that our clients can work with. We need to be able to help them think through the strategies of how to apply this information, so that they know we've got their back, so that they know we are supporting them along the way. Does that make sense? Is that the kind of care you would like from your care team, from your A team, your health A team? I know it's what I want. Quick little story, just as we are getting close to the end of our information today, is a couple of years ago, I broke my arm, not once, but twice within 10 weeks. And so I also, in one of those accidents, I had an avulsion fracture in my ankle. So I went to the physiotherapist. Did he hurt me when I was there? Oh yeah, 21 times, 21 times. Did I cry when I was there? More often than not. Did he give me homework to do? Yes, he did. Did the homework hurt like anything? Oh my stars, I made myself cry doing the homework. Why do I say this? Because what he told me when I went in on the first appointment was because, well, the first was a wrist fracture, double wrist fracture, and the second was a broken olecranon. And he said, with all the injuries you've had to that arm, you will be lucky to regain 75% of your movement, your mobility, and your strength. And I looked at him and I said, with all the love I can muster for him, because he's been with me through a lot, I said to him, screw you. I said, I'm gaining back 99 to 100%, and I'm going to do everything you say and more. And I did, and I have. My arm is, I would say, 99% for strength and for mobility. And that's because he did not candy coat things. He told me what I needed to do in the moment, and as things improved, he changed what we were doing, and I changed what I was doing based on his recommendations. So iridologists cannot diagnose and prescribe, and it's imperative, absolutely imperative, that we also give the correct amount of information in any one session, right? That we not overload, that we not underload, that we give good value, give more value by giving the right information. So important. So if you're curious about iridology and you want to learn more, just give you a tiny bit of information. And I know this is a little ways off, but I'm inviting you to, oops, these slides did not update. Dang it. Okay, let me correct this date here. I corrected them on one computer, but obviously it didn't come over because I'd opened this file already. So scratch, scratch. The next course information webinar, where we're going to be talking about the dynamic iridology assessment system for holistic practitioners, will be held on Tuesday, February 23rd. So this information on your screen is incorrect. Tuesday, February 23rd at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We won't be daylight at that time. Mountain Standard Time. Did you make a note of all of that? Because the next course start date is Wednesday, April 21st. But if you want to learn iridology and you want to start before April 21st, reach out to me. We'll have a conversation. I've got a plan for you. There's a way you can start before April 21st and still get into the fully mentored program. Oh my goodness, on April 21st. So again, we are just starting a new class tomorrow and registration is closed, but the next start date is April 21st, April 21st. I can't even give you the registration link for that info webinar because it didn't copy over for me. Okay, if you would like that, that information for the next info session, if you want information on any of the courses or the info sessions, send me a PM with your email address and tell me what you would like, and I will make sure to send it to you personally. Okay, we'll do that. And that goes for anybody who is who views this at a later date as well. You can always PM me. I'm on Facebook all over the place. I'm on Instagram under Iridology Education, and I'm happy to help you with that. The course is the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System for Holistic Health Practitioners. It is the only live, online, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, and naturopaths who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. Did you see, as we did those analyses, particularly the 2 client analyses, how understanding what their eyes were saying and how to correlate that sped up the assessment system? I did not need to ask a billion irrelevant questions. I could laser focus my questions based on what my client needed and wanted, right? And what that does is it cuts out your unpaid overtime. If you are currently taking your own time after hours to create client programs, that's not paying your bills. And if you can get your client programs created right in your client sessions, how much free time is that going to give you? What's that going to allow you to do as far as seeing more clients or having a life outside of your office? Perry says, I would love that. Yeah, Perry, then we need to have a chat. We need to have a chat. PM me your email address. I might actually even have yours. I think I just added you to my database, didn't I? You just sent that to me on Facebook. And I'll send you a link. We can book a phone call to talk about this. And that goes for anybody who's viewing this. We can book a phone call to talk about how to get into the course so that you can learn what I just shared with you and so much more. So again, correct information. Please, please, please disregard the info you see on the screen. Okay, how human can I possibly be? You're seeing all my technical flaws right now. Yeah. Next course information session is Tuesday, February 23rd at 5 p.m. The next course start date with live mentoring from the get-go is Wednesday, April 21st. However, there is a way that you can actually start in the home study program right away and get rolled into the live class when it starts on the 21st to get all of the mentoring as well. So if that's of interest to you, send me a PM. Yes, and Perry says, I spend so much time typing up notes after I see a client. Oh my goodness, Perry. Oh, that is just so, yeah, that makes me tired for you. And when you understand iridology and can integrate it with your nutrition or your herbology or whatever your other modalities are, it can be a tremendous asset to you to help you save time and actually deliver better information and better results for your clients. Well, my dear friends, thank you so much for being with me. Working smarter, not harder is what Womb Therapist says on Instagram. Absolutely, Womb Therapist. So everything I promised to my webinar people. I promise to those of you who are on Instagram with me, if you want the information for the course links or things like that, let me know. If you want to book a phone call to talk about the course on the program and whether you're starting April 21st with me or whether you actually want to start in the self-study program right now to get a jump start on things, send me a PM. I must run because one of the things I offer to all of my students and my grads is a mentoring session twice a month. And that mentoring session for them starts in 2 minutes. So I got to go and set that up. Thank you so much for being with me today. I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye for now.